The red rocks of the canyon walls stood like ancient sentinels against the harsh October sky of 1870. Dust devils danced across the barren landscape, carrying with them the scent of sage and the promise of another merciless day in the Arizona Territory. The mining towns scattered throughout these lands were dying slow deaths, their wooden buildings bleached pale by the relentless sun, their hopes exhausted like the veins of silver they'd once pursued. Samuel Hayes pressed his back against a boulder, squinting through the heat shimmer at a jackrabbit 50 yards out. His Winchester felt heavy in his hands, heavier than it had during his cavalry days at Fort Apache. Those days were long buried now, along with everything else that had mattered. The rabbit's ears twitched, sensing danger. But Sam's finger hesitated on the trigger. Even after 3 years of living alone in these canyons, the silence that followed a gunshot still reminded him of things better forgotten. His cabin sat nestled in a narrow gorge 2 miles north, hidden from the main trail that wound through Skeleton Pass. It wasn't much. Rough-hewn logs chinked with mud, a stone chimney that leaked smoke, and a door that groaned like an old man's bones. But it kept the scorpions out and the memories at bay. Mostly. The rabbit bolted before Sam could decide whether to shoot. He lowered the rifle, watching the creature disappear into a maze of creosote bushes. His stomach growled, reminding him that the last of his jerky had run out yesterday. He'd have to make the trek down to Millstone tomorrow, endure the stares and whispers that followed him like tumbleweeds. Night came fast in the canyonlands, painting the sky in shades of blood and ash. Sam picked his way through the familiar rocks, his boots finding purchase on paths worn smooth by his daily passages. The temperature plummeted as darkness took hold, and he pulled his worn and cavalry coat tighter around his shoulders. That's when he heard it, a sound that didn't belong to the desert night, not the yip of coyotes or the rustle of sidewinders. It was thin, desperate, and unmistakably human. A child's cry, muffled and weak, drifting on the wind like a ghost's lament. Sam froze, every instinct from his soldier days flooding back. He'd heard stories in Millstone about the trails that ran through these parts, not just for honest folk heading west, but darker paths where human cargo moved under cover of night. The old-timers called it the Devil's Highway, though they'd hush up quick when strangers came asking. The crying came again, somewhere to the east, where the old freight road cut through a grove of skeletal cottonwoods. Sam checked his rifle's action and moved forward, keeping to the shadows. The moon hadn't risen yet, and the stars provided just enough light to navigate without stumbling. He smelled them before he saw them, horses, sweat, and something else. Fear had a particular scent, sharp and acrid, and it hung heavy in the still air. Through the twisted branches, he caught sight of a wagon, its canvas top torn and flapping like a surrender flag. No driver, no horses, just abandoned in the middle of the trail like refuse. Sam circled wide, listening. No voices, no movement save for that persistent whimpering. He approached the wagon's rear, rifle at the ready, and used the barrel to lift the torn canvas. What he found inside made his stomach turn and his hands shake with a fury he hadn't felt in years. 2 children, no more than 7 or 8 by the looks of them, bound hand and foot with rough hemp rope. Twins, a boy and a girl. Their faces so alike it was like seeing double in the starlight. Their clothes were little more than rags, and bruises mottled their exposed skin in ugly patterns. The girl's eyes found his first, wide and wild with terror. She tried to scream, but only managed a hoarse whisper. The boy lay still, eyes closed, his breathing shallow and ragged. "Easy now," Sam said, his voice rusty from disuse. He hadn't spoken to another soul in weeks. "I'm not gonna hurt you." He climbed into the wagon, pulling out his knife to cut their bonds. The rope had bitten deep into their wrists, leaving angry welts that would scar. As soon as the girl's hands were free, she grabbed her brother, shaking him gently, speaking in a language Sam didn't recognize. Not Spanish, not any of the Indian tongues he'd picked up during his service. The boy's eyes fluttered open, unfocused and glassy with fever. Sam touched his forehead, burning hot despite the cool night air. "We need to move." Sam muttered, more to himself than to the children. Whoever had left them here might circle back, and he didn't fancy explaining his presence with a bullet. He gathered the boy in his arms, surprised at how little he weighed. The girl clung to Sam's coat, stumbling along beside him as they made their way back to his hidden canyon. The journey took twice as long as usual. Sam constantly checking over his shoulder, expecting to see riders materializing from the darkness. By the time they reached his cabin, a dust storm was building in the west, its approaching wall blotting out the stars. Sam kicked open his door and deposited the children near the cold fireplace. His hands worked automatically. Kindling, matches, the careful construction of a fire that would last through the night. As orange light filled the small space, he got his first good look at his unexpected guests. Despite their condition, he could see they'd been beautiful children once. High cheekbones, dark hair that might shine if washed, eyes the color of desert amber. Something about them tugged at a memory he couldn't quite grasp, like trying to hold water in cupped hands. The girl hadn't let go of her brother, whispering constantly in his ear as if her words alone could keep him tethered to this world. Sam found his water barrel, filled a pot, and set it to heat over the fire. He had some willow bark that might help with the boy's fever, and clean cloth to tend their wounds. As he worked, cleaning and bandaging, the dust storm hit full force. The wind howled through the canyon like a living thing, rattling his shutters and sending fingers of sand through every crack. But inside, the fire crackled warm and bright. The girl watched him with those amber eyes, flinching each time he came near but never loosening her grip on her brother. When Sam offered her a cup of water, she sniffed it suspiciously before taking a small sip, then helped her brother drink. "I can shelter you," Sam found himself saying, the words coming from somewhere deep and long buried. "No one will treat you like goods again." The girl tilted her head, not understanding his words, but perhaps reading something in his tone. For the first time, her death grip on her brother eased slightly. Sam settled back on his haunches, watching the children in the firelight. His mind drifted, unbidden, to another night years ago. The acrid smell of smoke, the screech of twisted metal, screams cut short. The westbound train out of Tucson, carrying his whole world in a single passenger car. Mary's face, pale with fear as the bandit stormed through. Little Sarah, barely 5, clutching her silver locket as she was torn from her mother's arms. He'd searched for months, following every lead, every whispered rumor, but the desert kept its secrets, and eventually, even hope became too heavy to carry. So he'd retreated here, to this narrow canyon where the only ghosts were his own. The boy moaned in his sleep, and his sister began humming a lullaby, strange and haunting in the storm-wrapped night. Sam recognized the melody, not the words, which remained foreign, but the rhythm, the rises and falls. It was the same tune Mary used to hum while cooking, the one she'd learned from her grandmother back in Missouri. His hands stilled on the bandage he was wrapping. It couldn't be. The world wasn't that small, fate not that cruel or kind. But as he studied the children's faces in the dancing firelight, he saw it, the slight upturn of the nose, the particular way their eyebrows arched, Mary's features, softened and reformed, but unmistakable. The storm raged outside, but inside Sam's cabin, time seemed to stop. He'd sheltered runaways before, in his cavalry days. He'd seen the aftermath of what men could do when they viewed other humans as property, but this felt different, personal in a way that scared him more than any Apache war party ever had. The girl had stopped humming, her eyelids drooping despite her vigilance. Sam gently pried her fingers from her brother's arm and lifted her onto his narrow cot. She weighed nothing, bird bones and determination. He did the same with the boy, laying them side by side, covering them with his only blanket, as he sat by the fire, feeding it steadily against the cold desert night. Sam Hayes made a decision. Come morning, he'd need supplies, medicine, food, information. The trip to Millstone would be dangerous now, but necessary. And if anyone came looking for their lost goods, well, They'd find out that some things in this harsh land were still worth fighting for. The wind died down near dawn, leaving an eerie quiet in its wake. Sam stepped outside to find the landscape transformed. Sand drifted against the cabin walls like snow. In the growing light, he could see fresh wagon tracks on the trail below. Heading east, they'd be back. He knew. Men who dealt in human cargo didn't give up easily. But for now, the children slept safe behind thick log walls, and Samuel Hayes stood guard as he once had in another life, when he still believed the world could be just and God might show mercy. Perhaps, he thought, watching the sun paint the red rocks gold. There was still time for both. The morning sun crept through the canyon walls like a cautious visitor, painting long shadows across the dusty floor. Ice crystals clung to the shadowed rocks, testament to the desert's nightly transformation from furnace to icebox. Sam Hayes stood at his cabin door, watching the light inch its way down, calculating whether he had enough time to reach Millstone and return before dark. Inside, the twins still slept, curled together like they'd been born that way. The boy's fever had broken during the night, leaving him weak but breathing easier. The girl, Sam had started thinking of her as the fierce one, had woken twice, her amber eyes tracking his every movement until exhaustion pulled her back under. He'd managed to get some broth into them, made from the last of his dried venison. They'd need more substantial food soon, and medicine beyond his meager supplies. The willow bark had helped, but the boy's wounds showed signs of infection that worried him. Sam checked his rifle, counted his ammunition, and strapped on the Colt .45 he rarely wore anymore. The weight of it against his hip brought back memories of patrol duties, of keeping peace in territories where peace was just another word for temporary ceasefire. He filled his canteen, left water and some hardtack within reach of the children, and set out for town. The 3-hour trek to Millstone tested his vigilance. Every shadow could hide a rider. Every bird's call might signal approach. But the trail remained empty, save for a lone prospector leading a mule loaded with disappointment and dreams deferred. Millstone huddled in a valley between two mesa, its single street rutted deep by wagon wheels and false promises. The Silver Dollar Saloon anchored one end, Holcomb's General Store the other, with a scattered collection of businesses between. The barber who also pulled teeth, the bathhouse that charged extra for hot water, the undertaker who built furniture on slow days. Sam hitched his horse outside Holcomb's, steeling himself for the interaction. 3 years of self-imposed exile had made him a curiosity in town, the hermit soldier who'd lost his mind along with his family. He could feel eyes on him as he pushed through the door, conversations stopping mid-sentence. Ezra Holcomb looked up from his ledger, his merchant smile faltering when he saw who'd entered. Sam Hayes. Been a while. Need supplies, Sam said, pulling out his list. Flour, salt pork, canned milk if you have it. Canned milk? Ezra's eyebrows rose. That's dear. $2 a can, when I can get it. Sam placed a gold eagle on the counter, one of the few he had left from his separation pay. I'll take what you have. As Ezra gathered the items, Sam forced himself to act casual. Also need some carbolic acid and bandages. Someone heard up at your place? The question came from Martha Holcomb, emerging from the back room like she'd been summoned by gossip itself. Cut myself chopping wood. Sam lied. Went deep. Martha's eyes narrowed. She'd been the closest thing to a friend Mary had found in this God-forsaken place, and her suspicion felt justified. But she said nothing, just added a small bottle of laudanum to his pile. On the house, for the pain. Sam nodded his thanks, avoiding her searching gaze. He was almost to the door when she spoke again. Funny thing, Tom Bridger came through yesterday, said he saw wagon tracks near Skeleton Pass. Said it looked like someone dumped cargo and ran. Course, Tom drinks more than he prospects these days. Sam's hand tightened on his package. That's so? Also said 3 men came through this morning, asking about missing property. Rough sorts, the kind that make honest folk lock their doors. Their eyes met across the cluttered store, and in Martha's gaze, Sam saw understanding dawn. She glanced around, ensuring they were alone, then leaned forward. "You be careful. Sam Hayes, whatever you're sheltering up in that canyon, there's some that view it as theirs by right of purchase. They're staying at the Silver Dollar, last I heard, planning to search every hiding spot between here and the Colorado line." Sam touched his hat brim and left without another word. But instead of heading straight home, he made one more stop. Dr. Marcus Finch operated from a room behind the barber shop, treating everything from gunshot wounds to gout with equal measures of competence and whiskey. "Sam," the doctor said, looking up from a medical text. "Heard you were in town." Word traveled fast in Millstone. Sam set a silver dollar on the table. "Need your advice. Hypothetically, if someone had children with infected wounds, fever, hadn't eaten proper in days, what would you recommend?" Finch studied him over his spectacles. "Hypothetically, clean the wounds twice daily with carbolic solution, 1 part to 20 parts boiled water. Keep them warm, fed, and hydrated. Beef broth if they can keep it down. Adding vegetables as they improve. Watch for red streaks from the wounds. That's blood poisoning. And you'd need to bring them in regardless of circumstances." He reached into his medicine cabinet and pulled out several small bottles. Quinine for fever. Morphine solution for pain. 2 drops in water for a child. No more. And this, he added a tin of salve. "My own mixture, calendula and comfrey. Helps wounds heal clean." Sam reached for his money, but Finch waved him off. The dollar covered the consultation. The rest, call it Christian charity. Though I'd remind you that harboring runaways is a dangerous business, even out here where federal law is more suggestion than fact. "Don't know what you mean," Sam said, pocketing the medicines. "Course not." Finch returned to his book. "But if these hypothetical children need real medical attention, you bring them back door after midnight. Some laws deserve breaking." Sam left town by a different route, circling wide through a dried creek bed. His caution proved warranted when he spotted fresh horse tracks cutting across his usual trail. 3 riders, moving slow, checking every cave and crevice. He reached his canyon as the sun hit its zenith. The October heat still fierce despite the season. The children were awake, the girl supporting her brother as he sipped water from Sam's tin cup. They both froze when he entered, the boy trying to push his sister behind him despite his weakness. "Easy," Sam said, setting down his packages. "Just me." He showed them the food, the medicine, trying to convey safety through tone and gesture. The girl watched him prepare the carbolic solution, her sharp intelligence evident in how quickly she understood its purpose. When he cleaned her brother's wounds, she held the boy steady, whispering that strange lullaby. As the afternoon wore on, Sam cooked a proper meal, salt pork and biscuits, with canned milk mixed thin for the children to drink. They ate like they hadn't seen food in days, which was likely true. The boy managed to keep it down, color returning slightly to his cheeks. Communication remained a challenge. Sam tried English, Spanish, even the smattering of Apache he'd learned. Nothing sparked recognition. But the girl was clever, using gestures to indicate they'd been traveling many days, that bad men had taken them from somewhere far away. She pointed east consistently when trying to explain their origin. As evening approached, Sam faced a decision. The men in town would expand their search, and his hidden canyon wouldn't stay hidden long. He needed to prepare defenses, but more importantly, he needed information. He was cleaning his rifle when the girl approached, something clutched in her small fist. She held it out, a piece of paper, water-stained and torn, that she'd apparently kept hidden in her ragged dress. Sam unfolded it carefully. It was part of a bill of sale, the kind used for cargo manifests. Most was illegible, but he could make out portions. 2 units, age approximately 7, acquired from transport to California territory. Property of Morrison Trading Company. Sam's hands shook as he read. The Morrison Trading Company operated out of San Francisco, but their reach extended throughout the territories. They dealt in everything from mining equipment to human lives, always staying just within the loose interpretation of a law that governed the frontier. The girl pointed to the paper, then to herself and her brother, her meaning clear. This was their proof of sale, their reduction from human to commodity. Then she took the paper back and, with great deliberation, tore it to pieces. Sam understood. Whatever claim anyone had on these children, she was rejecting it. They would rather die free than live as property. As darkness fell, he prepared for the possibility of violence. The children helped as they could, the girl showing surprising knowledge of defensive positioning. She had been hunted before. Sam realized this wasn't her first time running. He taught them the layout of his cabin, the hidden cellar where they could hide if needed, the signal he'd give if danger approached. The boy, despite his weakness, insisted on keeping watch by the window. These children had learned too young that safety was always temporary. Trust a luxury they couldn't afford. But something was shifting between them. When Sam handed the girl a blanket, she didn't flinch. When he checked the boy's bandages, the child actually smiled. A fleeting thing, but real. They were beginning to believe, perhaps, that this gruff hermit meant what he said about shelter. As the stars emerged in the clear desert sky, Sam sat by the door with his rifle across his knees, the children huddled by the fire, the girl singing softly to her brother, that haunting melody again, so like Mary's song it made his chest ache. Tomorrow he'd need to make hard choices. The men hunting these children wouldn't give up easily. There would be blood before this was over. But tonight, in his simple cabin, two small souls had found sanctuary. For a man who'd thought his capacity for protection had died with his family. It was a strange resurrection. The desert wind carried the distant howl of coyotes, that wild chorus that marked the boundary between civilization and something older, freer. Sam checked his rifle one more time and settled in for a long watch. Whatever came with the dawn, these children wouldn't face it as property. He'd make sure of that, even if it cost him everything. The wolves came with the new moon, their howls echoing through the canyon like the voices of the damned. Sam counted at least 6 distinct calls, maybe more. They'd been circling closer each night, drawn by the scent of habitation where before there had been only one lonely man. He'd spent the day reinforcing his perimeter, sharpened stakes angled outward, tin cans strung with pebbles for noise, deadfalls rigged at the canyon's narrow entrance. The children watched him work. The boy, who seemed stronger each day, attempting to help despite his still healing wounds. 3 days had passed since Sam's trip to Millstone. 3 days of unexpected domesticity that stirred memories better left buried. The girl had proven herself remarkably capable, taking over cooking duties with an efficiency that suggested hard experience. She'd even managed to communicate her name through patient repetition. Eliza. Her brother was James, though she called him something that sounded like Yasha in quieter moments. Now, as darkness settled over their hidden refuge, Sam added more wood to the fire. The wolves wouldn't come too close to flame, but their presence meant something had driven them from their usual hunting grounds. Or someone. "Story," James said suddenly, one of the few English words he'd picked up. He pointed to Sam, then made a talking gesture with his hand. Sam settled against the wall, rifle within reach. He wasn't much for storytelling, but the boy's expectant face made refusal impossible. "All right then. This must have been summer of '62. I was stationed at Fort Grant. Green as spring grass and twice as likely to bend in the wind. We got word that Apache had hit a wagon train near Sulphur Springs." He kept the tale light, focusing on the landscape, the way the desert looked at dawn, how to read sign in sandy soil. But memories had their own momentum. As he spoke, his mind drifted to another story, one he'd never told anyone. "Had a daughter once," he found himself saying. The children grew still, perhaps sensing the weight in his voice. "Sarah, no bigger than you. Eliza, hair like her mother's, black as crow feathers but soft as silk. She had this laugh, like water over stones." Eliza crept closer, her amber eyes fixed on his weathered face. "She loved stories too. Every night, she'd beg for just one more. Her favorite was about a princess in a tower, waiting for rescue. I'd tell her she didn't need to wait for anyone, that she was brave enough to rescue herself. She'd giggle and say, "But Papa, what if I want to rescue other people instead?" Sam's throat constricted. He reached for his canteen, buying time to compose himself. The train was supposed to be safe. Cavalry escort, experienced crew, but the Devil's Den gang had other plans. They derailed it just outside Tucson, came through the cars like locusts. I was in Prescott, delivering dispatches. By the time I got word and rode back, James laid a small hand on Sam's knee. The gesture so unexpected it nearly undid him. They took some folks, the young ones, mostly. Said they'd been sold south, but the trail went cold at the border. I searched for months, nearly went mad with it. Then I came here, figured if I couldn't save my own, wasn't much point in anything else. Eliza spoke in her own language, the words soft but urgent. Then, with great effort, she managed, "No, loss." The wolves howled again, closer now. Sam could see their eyes reflecting the firelight just beyond his barrier. But for once, the sound didn't seem threatening. It was just another voice in the wilderness, crying out against the dark. He was about to suggest sleep when Eliza suddenly grabbed his wrist. Her fingers found the leather cord around his neck, the one he'd worn so long he'd forgotten it was there. She pulled gently, and he let her, watching as she drew out what hung from it, a small silver locket, tarnished with age. Sarah's locket, the one thing he'd managed to recover from the wreckage. Eliza's face went pale. She turned to her brother, rapid words spilling out in their shared tongue. James struggled upright, staring at the locket with wide eyes. Then, with shaking hands, he reached into his own shirt and pulled out an identical piece, smaller, more delicate, but unmistakably a match. The world seemed to tilt on its axis. Sam took the locket with numb fingers, opening it with a tiny catch he knew by feel. Inside, a photograph barely visible in the firelight, Mary holding baby Sarah, and beside them, 2 infants in christening gowns. "The twins," he whispered. Mary's sister had twins, died in childbirth, and we were going to raise them. They were on the train. His mind reeled, trying to bridge the gap of years. The children taken in the raid, sold into bondage, somehow surviving to end up back in the very territory they'd been stolen from. It seemed impossible, but the evidence was there in silver and faded photographs. Elizabeth, he realized, named for Mary's mother, was crying silently. James clutched his sister's hand, both of them staring at Sam like he might vanish if they blinked. "You're Sarah's cousins," Sam said slowly. "Mary was bringing you home to me. Your family." The word felt foreign on his tongue, a language he'd forgotten how to speak. The wolves chose that moment to test his defenses. A large male rushed the barrier, triggering one of the deadfalls. The crash sent the pack scattering, but they'd be back. Sam stood, checking his rifle, but his hands shook too badly to aim properly. "Inside," he managed. "Both of you, in the cellar." But the children didn't move. Instead, James picked up a stick from the firewood pile, holding it like a club despite its obvious uselessness against wolves. Eliza found Sam's spare ammunition, laying it out with military precision. They were ready to fight, for him, for this place that had become, impossibly, home. The wolves circled again, testing different approaches. Sam fired a warning shot, the sound enormous in the confined canyon. It bought them time, but ammunition wasn't infinite. "Should have built that fence higher," he muttered, then felt a small hand slip into his. "Help," Eliza said firmly. "Family helps." The word broke something loose in Sam's chest, a dam that had held for 3 long years. He gripped her hand briefly, then showed them how to reload while he watched the perimeter. The night stretched endless, punctuated by howls and the occasional probe of their defenses, but the wolves seemed less aggressive than desperate. And as dawn approached, Sam understood why. Smoke on the eastern horizon, The acrid smell of burning sage. Someone had set fires, driving wildlife before them. "They're coming," he said quietly. "The men from Morrison Trading Company, using the oldest trick in the hunter's book, let nature do the dangerous work, then collect what's flushed out." He looked at the children, his family, impossible as it seemed, and made a decision. They couldn't run, not with James still weak, but they could make standing expensive for anyone who tried to take what was his. "Remember what I taught you about the cellar?" he told them. "If things go bad—" "No," James interrupted, his English suddenly clear. "We stay together." Eliza nodded firmly. "Family stays." Sam wanted to argue, but the look in their eyes stopped him. They'd been cargo once, powerless and alone. Now they had a choice, and they'd made it. As the sun crested the canyon walls, painting the rocks in shades of blood and gold, Sam Hayes prepared for war, but for the first time in 3 years, he wouldn't fight alone. The twins stood with him, these children who shared his lost daughter's blood, who'd traveled through hell to find the only family they had left. The wolves had vanished with the dawn, but greater predators were coming. Sam checked his weapons one last time, said a prayer to a God he'd stopped believing in, and waited. Whatever came next, these children would never be property again. He'd carved that promise in lead and fire if necessary. The morning wind carried the sound of horses, the jingle of spurs and creak of leather. 3 riders, maybe 4, working their way up the hidden trail. Sam positioned the children behind solid cover, distributed his ammunition, and settled in behind his rifle. The red rock stood witness, ancient and impassive, to another small drama in the long history of the frontier. But for Sam and the twins, this was the whole world, a fortress built of love and desperate determination, defended by a man who'd found reason to fight again and 2 children who refused to be owned. The first rider appeared at the canyon mouth, and Sam's finger found the trigger. The time for hiding was over. Now came the reckoning. The first shot came at dusk, shattering the window and sending glass across the cabin floor. Sam pulled the children down, his body shielding theirs as 2 more bullets punched through the thin walls. The Morrison men had found them. "Stay low," he hissed, crawling toward his rifle position. Through a crack in the logs, he counted muzzle flashes. 4 shooters. Spread in a half circle around the cabin's front, they'd learned caution after losing a man to his deadfall trap that afternoon. The siege had been methodical. First came Jack Morrison himself, riding up bold as brass with 2 hired guns, demanding the return of his property. Sam's refusal had been punctuated with a warning shot that sent them scrambling. They'd returned with reinforcements, probing his defenses, looking for weakness. Now, as darkness fell, they decided to force the issue. Sam returned fire, picking his shots carefully. Ammunition was finite, and he couldn't afford to waste it. A yelp from outside told him he'd found flesh, but the shooting continued. "Hayes!" Morrison's voice carried across the canyon. "No need for anyone else to die. Send out them brats and we'll call it square." "Go to hell," Sam shouted back, then immediately rolled to a new position as bullets sought his voice. Eliza crawled up beside him, the ammunition box clutched in her small hands. Her face was pale but determined. James had taken position by the back window with Sam's pistol, too heavy for him to fire accurately, but the sight of it might give attackers pause. The exchange continued for an hour, muzzle flashes lighting the darkness like deadly fireflies. Sam's military training served him well. He'd turned the cabin into a fortress, with predetermined fields of fire and fallback positions. But numbers would tell eventually. Then, unexpected, the sound of a horse approaching from the east trail, a single rider, moving fast despite the treacherous terrain. The shooting paused as both sides tried to identify this new player. "Sam Hayes," a woman's voice, clear and carrying. "Doctor, Finch sent me with medical supplies. I'm coming in." Sam recognized Clara Winters's voice, the young widow who ran Millstone's small pharmacy. What in blazes was she doing here? "Hold your fire," Morrison barked at his men. Even he wouldn't shoot a woman without cause. not with witnesses. Clara rode straight through the battle lines like they didn't exist, her horse's hooves striking sparks from the rocky ground. She dismounted at Sam's door, saddlebags heavy with supplies. "Figured you might need help," she said calmly, as if riding into gunfights was commonplace. "Martha Holcomb saw these men buying ammunition. The whole town knows what they're about." Sam opened the door just enough to let her squeeze through. Clara's presence changed everything. Morrison couldn't simply murder them all now, not with a respected townswoman as witness. She took in the scene quickly, the two children huddled behind overturned furniture. Sam's bloody sleeve where a bullet had grazed him, the scattered glass and splintered wood. "You're hurt," she said, already opening her medical bag. "It'll keep. Clara, you shouldn't be here." "Hush." She pulled out bandages and carbolic. "Those men in town were boasting about reclaiming escaped property. Made my blood boil. These children aren't cattle to be branded and sold." While she worked on his arm, Clara kept talking, her voice carrying clearly outside. "Doctor, Finch is gathering the town council. Seems folks are tired of Morrison Trading Company, thinking they own everything that moves through these parts. Sheriff's riding up from Prescott. Should be here by dawn." It was a bluff. The sheriff was probably drunk in some saloon. But Morrison couldn't know that. "You're interfering with legal recovery of property." Morrison shouted, "I got papers." "Papers saying what?" Clara called back. "That you own human beings?" "This isn't Georgia, Mr. Morrison. Arizona territory has different ideas about such things." She turned to the children, her demeanor softening. "I'm Clara," she said gently. "I'm here to help." Eliza studied her with those two wise eyes, then nodded slowly. James managed a weak smile. The night grew quiet, neither side willing to escalate with Clara present. Sam could hear the men arguing among themselves, Morrison's voice angry but uncertain. Clara used the lull to properly treat Sam's wound and check the children. "They're malnourished but healing well," she said quietly. "You've done good by them. Sam, they're family," he said simply. "My wife's sister's children. Thought they were dead until they appeared like a miracle," Clara finished. "Martha suspected as much, said you looked like a man seeing ghosts when you bought those supplies." A rifle shot interrupted them, followed by Morrison's voice. "1 hour. Hayes, the woman leaves with us, or we burn you out." Clara snorted. "I'd like to see them try. Half the town would hang them for murdering a widow." But Sam knew Morrison was desperate. Desperate men did foolish things. He began planning alternatives. Could they slip out the back, lose themselves in the canyon maze? But James was still too weak for hard travel, and the horses were exposed. "I'm not leaving," Clara announced, as if reading his thoughts. "These children need medical care, and that's what I'm providing. Anyone wants to stop me, they'll answer to the Miners Association. My late husband was a member in good standing." It was a thin shield, but in a territory where mining interests ruled, it might suffice. The hour passed slowly. Sam positioned himself to cover both entrances while Clara fashioned a sling for James's arm. The boy had aggravated his injuries trying to help defend. Then, impossibly, came the sound of multiple horses from the main trail. Lots of them, moving with military precision. 3rd Cavalry, detachment from Fort Grant. The voice was young, but carried authority. "Stand down! All weapons lowered." Sam peered through the window in disbelief. A dozen soldiers, led by a fresh-faced lieutenant, filled the canyon entrance. Their Spencer carbines gleamed in the moonlight. Morrison emerged from cover, blustering. "This is private business, soldier boy. No call for Army involvement. Telegram from Fort Lowell," the lieutenant said crisply. "Reports of armed men threatening civilians. Possible kidnapping attempt. The Army takes a dim view of such activities near our patrol routes." Clara squeezed Sam's shoulder. "I might have sent word to Captain Brennan at Fort Grant. He owes me favors from when I treated his men for fever last spring." The standoff collapsed quickly. Morrison's hired guns wanted no part of facing trained cavalry. They melted away into the darkness. leaving their employer to sputter threats about lawyers and territorial judges. "You'll want to move along," the lieutenant suggested to Morrison. "My men get nervous in the dark. Accidents happen." Morrison glared at the cabin one last time. "This isn't over. Hayes, those brats are legally mine. Bought and paid for. I'll have the law on you." "Try it," Sam called back. "But you might want to explain to that judge how you came by 2 American-born children with family connections. Last I heard, buying and selling free citizens was frowned upon, even out here." Morrison wheeled his horse and galloped away, pursued by the mocking calls of the soldiers. The lieutenant approached the cabin. "Sam Hayes, Captain Brennan sends his regards. Says you saved his life at Apache Pass in '61. He was happy to return the favor." Sam barely remembered the incident, one skirmish among many. But he'd take the luck. "We'll camp here tonight." The lieutenant continued. "Make sure those fellows don't circle back. Come morning, you might want to consider more permanent arrangements. The Army can't babysit indefinitely." As the soldiers set up camp, Clara finally tended properly to everyone's injuries. The children had acquired various cuts from flying glass, and Sam's arm needed proper stitching. "You'll have scars," she said, threading her needle. "But then, I suppose you're used to those." "Some are worth it," Sam replied, watching Eliza help her brother drink water. "These ones I'll wear proud." Clara's hands paused in their work. "They're lucky to have found you." "Other way around," Sam corrected. "I was dead inside, just going through motions. They brought me back." She finished the stitching in silence, but her touch was gentle. When done, she began packing her supplies. "You'll need ongoing care for the boy," she said. "I could ride out weekly, check on his progress. That's a lot of trouble." "It's no trouble." She met his eyes directly. "Those children deserve a chance at real family. And maybe you deserve a chance at not being alone." Before Sam could respond, she was out the door, organizing sleeping arrangements with the soldiers. Efficient and unstoppable. Eliza tugged at his sleeve. "Good," the girl said carefully. "Like you." Sam watched Clara through the window, seeing her laugh at something a soldier said, the moonlight catching in her hair. For the first time in 3 years, he allowed himself to think beyond mere survival. "Yeah," he said quietly. "She is." The night passed peacefully, the presence of the cavalry ensuring no further violence. But Sam knew this was just a respite. Morrison would return with legal papers, territorial marshals, whatever it took. The fight for the children's freedom had only begun. But now he wasn't fighting alone. Clara Winters had ridden into his battle and chosen a side. The children grew stronger each day, and somewhere in the vast machinery of Army bureaucracy, old debts were being repaid. As dawn broke over the canyon, painting the rocks in shades of hope, Sam Hayes began to believe they might actually win this war. The twins slept safely in his cabin, his family, returned by impossible chance. And outside, a remarkable woman was brewing coffee for soldiers, planning her next visit, weaving herself into their story with medical skill and fierce compassion. "They were sold like goods," he murmured, repeating his promise. "But they'll live as family. I'll make sure of it." The red rocks stood witness to his vow, ancient and enduring, guardians of this small refuge where broken people were slowly becoming whole again. The blizzard struck without warning on the 5th day of November, transforming the desert into an alien landscape of white fury. Sam had seen snow in these parts before, but nothing like this. A proper norther that howled down from Colorado with teeth like knives and a hunger for warmth. He'd barely managed to get the horses into the lean-to before visibility dropped to nothing. Now, watching through the cabin's single window as the world disappeared behind a curtain of white, he calculated their supplies. 3 days, maybe 4 if they were careful. The cavalry had left 2 weeks prior, and Clara's last visit had been 6 days ago. Cold, James said, his English improving daily. The boy huddled near the fireplace, wrapped in every blanket they owned. Sam added another log to the fire, precious fuel that would need to last. Come away from the window. Eliza, the cold seeps through. But the girl remained pressed against the glass, watching the storm with intense concentration. She'd been restless all morning, pacing the small cabin like a caged wolf. The wind struck the cabin like a physical thing, rattling the door in its frame. Sam checked his repairs from the gunfight. The patched holes, the reinforced hinges. They'd hold, but the cold was already finding ways inside. By noon, ice crystals formed on the interior walls. Sam hung blankets over the windows, creating another layer of insulation. The children helped, their small hands quick and sure. They'd survived worse. He realized, whatever horrors they'd endured before finding their way to his canyon, they'd learned to adapt. "We need to talk," he said finally, settling beside the fire. "About what you remember, about the train." Eliza and James exchanged glances, that silent communication twins perfect. Then Eliza began to speak, her English supplemented by gestures and the occasional Spanish words she'd picked up. The story came in fragments, the excitement of the train journey, their first time seeing the vast spaces between settlements, Mary, Tia Maria. Eliza called her, singing songs, pointing out landmarks, promising them a new life with Uncle Samuel and Cousin Sarah. Then chaos. Explosions, screaming, men with covered faces storming through the cars. Mary trying to shield all three children, fighting like a wildcat when they tried to take the twins. The last image. Mary reaching for them as rough hands dragged them away. Sarah's terrified face disappearing in smoke and confusion. "They sold us first to a man with gold teeth," James added quietly. "Then others. Always moving, always working, sometimes together, sometimes—" He trailed off, and Eliza gripped his hand. Sam's throat constricted with rage and grief. 3 years. These children had endured 3 years of being traded like livestock while he'd sat in his cabin, wallowing in self-pity. "The locket," he asked gently. "How did you keep it?" James touched his chest where the silver piece lay hidden. "Eliza hid it, said it was our connection to who we really were. When we forgot our real names, she'd show it to me. Said someday we'd find our family." The wind howled louder, and something heavy struck the roof. A tree branch, perhaps, torn free by the storm. Sam checked the ceiling, but it held firm. As afternoon deepened into early darkness, the temperature plummeted further. Their water bucket developed a skin of ice despite sitting near the fire. Sam knew they needed to conserve wood, but the children's lips were already tinged blue. He was adding another log when he heard it, a sound that didn't belong to the storm. Rhythmic pounding, deliberate and urgent. Someone at the door. Sam grabbed his rifle, motioning the children behind him. Who would be out in this weather? "Sam! Sam Hayes!" Clara's voice, barely audible above the wind. "Let me in." He yanked open the door, and she practically fell inside, covered in snow and ice. Her horse. He could see it tied to the porch post, head down against the storm. "Clara, what in God's name?" "Had to come," she gasped, shivering violently. "Saw the storm building. Knew you wouldn't have enough wood or food for this kind of freeze." She'd dragged a travois behind her horse, loaded with supplies despite the terrible conditions. Sam helped her haul it inside, split wood, canned goods, heavy blankets, and medicine. "You could have died," he said, wrapping a blanket around her shoulders. "That was foolish beyond measure." "Perhaps," she admitted, teeth chattering. "But I couldn't sit warm in town knowing you three were up here, not when—" She didn't finish, but her eyes said enough. Whatever was growing between them, it had driven her through a killing storm. Eliza brought her hot coffee, the last of their supply. Clara smiled her thanks, then noticed how the children stayed close to each other and to Sam. That unconscious circling of family. "I should put Storm in the lean-to," she said, referring to her horse. "I'll do it." Sam headed for the door. "You get warm." But when he opened the door, the world had vanished entirely. Snow fell so thick he couldn't see the porch rails. The wind would have torn him from his feet 3 steps out. "We're not going anywhere," he said, closing the door firmly. "Your horse will have to manage where he is for now." Clara nodded, understanding their situation. They were trapped. 4 souls in a small cabin while nature raged outside. The proximity should have been awkward, but instead felt natural, like pieces of a puzzle finding their places. As night fell, they arranged themselves around the fire. Sam told stories of his cavalry days, carefully edited for young ears. Clara shared tales from her childhood in Missouri. Before the war changed everything, the children listened with rapt attention, occasionally adding their own memories, fragments of a life before captivity, slowly emerging like spring flowers through snow. "My mother had hair like yours," Eliza told Clara shyly, black and shining. "She smelled like roses." "Your mother was Mary's sister?" Clara asked gently. Eliza nodded. "She died when we were small. Tia Maria took us in, said family takes care of family." The phrase hung in the warming air, profound in its simplicity. Sam watched Clara interact with the children, saw how naturally she fell into a maternal role, checking James's healing wounds, braiding Eliza's hair, making sure they ate enough. "You're good with them," he said quietly when the children dozed off. "I always wanted—" She stopped, pain flickering across her features. "My husband and I hoped for children, but the war took him before we had the chance." They sat in companionable silence, listening to the storm's fury. The cabin creaked and groaned but held firm, a small island of warmth in a frozen sea. "Why did you really come?" Sam asked eventually. "The truth." Clara met his gaze steadily. "Because I've spent 3 years being careful, being proper, being what this town expects a widow to be. Then I saw you with these children, saw you willing to die for them, and I realized I'm tired of being careful." She reached across the space between them, her fingers finding his. "Life's too short and too precious to waste on fear. That storm could have killed me, yes, but sitting safe in town while you faced this alone would have been a different kind of death." Sam turned his hand, interlacing their fingers. Her skin was calloused from work, strong and capable, like everything else about her. "The children need stability," he said carefully. "A real home, not just a cabin in the canyon. And Morrison won't give up. He'll be back with legal documents, custody claims. Then we'll fight him," Clara said simply. "Together. The town's behind you. Sam, what Morrison's doing, it doesn't sit right with folks. And I have some influence. My husband's family has connections in San Francisco. Lawyers who'd love to take on Morrison Trading Company." The wind chose that moment to literally shake the cabin, as if nature itself wanted to test their resolve. But inside, the fire crackled warm, and hope took root like a stubborn plant in rocky soil. "I should tell you," Clara added with a slight smile, "I'm a terrible cook, and I have opinions about everything, and I sometimes sing off-key when I think no one's listening." "I haven't smiled in 3 years." Sam countered. "I forget to shave for weeks, and I talk to my horse more than people. Sounds like we're perfectly unsuited for each other." Clara murmured. "Perfectly," Sam agreed. And for the first time since the train robbery, he found himself looking forward to tomorrow. The blizzard raged for 2 more days, trapping them in their small sanctuary. But instead of hardship, it became a gift. Time to heal, to plan, to weave 4 damaged souls into something resembling family. When the storm finally broke, revealing a world transformed by white, they emerged different too. Clara's horse had survived, sheltered by the cabin's wall. The canyon glittered with ice crystals, beautiful and treacherous. But the path forward seemed clearer now, marked not just by survival, but by possibility. As they prepared for Clara's return to town, she'd fetch proper supplies and begin legal proceedings against Morrison. Eliza tugged at her sleeve. "You'll come back?" the girl asked, vulnerability clear in her voice. Clara knelt, meeting her at eye level. "Wild horses couldn't keep me away. You're stuck with me now, all of you." Standing in the doorway, watching Clara navigate her horse down the icy trail, Sam felt something shift in his chest. The frozen thing that had been his heart for 3 years was finally, painfully, beginning to thaw. Clara returned 3 days later with more than supplies. She brought hope in the form of yellowed documents and faded ink, the careful records of a town clerk who took pride in his work. Thomas Hartley at the land office remembered the train robbery, she explained, spreading papers across Sam's rough table. He kept copies of the passenger manifest because his cousin died in the attack. Look here. Sam leaned close, aware of her lavender scent mixing with the wood smoke. The manifest listed Mary Hayes, S. Hayes, child, E. Carpenter, child, J. Carpenter, child. His finger traced the names, proof that the twins had been traveling legally with his wife. But there's more. Clara produced another document, this one bearing an official seal. Birth records from Tucson, Elizabeth and James Carpenter, born March 15, 1862. Parents, Margaret Carpenter, deceased, and Robert Carpenter, deceased. Legal guardian listed as Mary Hayes. Eliza and James crowded close, understanding that these papers meant something important, even if they couldn't read them. This proves they weren't runaways or abandoned children. Clara continued. They were under legal guardianship when taken. Morrison's claim of purchasing unclaimed property falls apart completely. Sam felt a weight lift from his shoulders. How did you manage all this? Martha Holcomb's nephew works in the Territorial Records Office, and Judge Thornton owes me for treating his gout last winter. Clara's smile held triumph. Morrison's been claiming he bought the children from a legitimate dealer in California, but I had them check. No such dealer exists at the address he provided. While the adults talked, James had wandered to the window. Suddenly, he tensed. Ryder's coming. Sam grabbed his rifle, but Clara placed a calming hand on his arm. I sent word to Sheriff Daniels in Prescott. That might be him. Indeed, 2 riders approached openly, badges glinting in the afternoon sun. Sheriff Daniels proved to be a lean, weathered man with sharp eyes and a no-nonsense manner. Mrs. Winters filled me in, he said after introductions. Morrison's been dancing on the edge of the law for years, but taking free children crosses a line. I need to hear the story from them, though. The next hour tested everyone's patience. Eliza, with James supporting her, managed to convey their story in halting English mixed with gestures. The sheriff listened intently, occasionally asking clarifying questions through Clara, who had developed a knack for understanding the children's communication. The man with gold teeth, the sheriff muttered at one point. That'd be Lucas Dane. We've been looking for him in connection with other activities. He turned to Sam. You'll testify to finding them in that wagon? Every word. Sam confirmed. Good. Morrison made a mistake coming to my jurisdiction. Daniels stood, adjusting his gun belt. I'll need the children to identify him formally, but we've got enough to arrest him for trafficking. The territorial prosecutor's been wanting a case like this. As the sheriff prepared to leave, he paused. Heard you were at Apache Pass in '61. My brother served in the 3rd Cavalry. Said a Sergeant Hayes saved his unit from an ambush. Just doing my duty, Sam said quietly. Well, consider this me doing mine. These children will stay where they belong. After the lawmen left, a strange quiet settled over the cabin. For the first time since finding the twins, the immediate threat had lifted. They could breathe, plan, think beyond the next attack. We should go to town, Clara suggested. All of us. The children need to be properly registered as your wards. And, she hesitated, there are other matters to discuss. Sam understood. Their relationship, kindled in crisis, needed to be acknowledged in the clear light of everyday life. The trip to Millstone the next morning felt like a parade. Word had spread about Morrison's arrest, and folks emerged from shops and saloons to see the hermit soldier and his newfound family. The twins, riding double on Sam's horse, shrank from the attention until Mrs. Holcomb bustled out with peppermint sticks. About time something good happened around here, she declared, pressing candy into small hands. You children come by my store later. I've got some proper clothes set aside. At the courthouse, Judge Thornton made the guardianship official with surprising efficiency. Given the circumstances and your clear blood relation to the children, I see no impediment to formalizing what Providence has reunited." He peered over his spectacles. "I assume you'll be providing a stable home environment?" "Yes, sir," Sam replied, acutely aware of Clara standing beside him. "Good, good. And Mrs. Winters, I understand you've taken an interest in the children's welfare?" "I have," Clara said firmly. The judge's eyes twinkled. "Excellent. Nothing like a woman's touch in raising young ones. I'll expect to hear of further developments in due course." The meaning wasn't subtle, and Sam felt heat rise in his neck. But Clara simply smiled and thanked the judge for his time. That evening found them in Clara's small house behind the pharmacy, the children marveling at indoor plumbing and glass windows that didn't leak. Clara had prepared a simple meal, and watching her move around the kitchen with easy efficiency, Sam glimpsed what life could be. "I've been thinking," Clara said as they washed dishes together, the children exploring the small library in her parlor. "Your cabin's too remote for winter, especially with the children needing school come spring. There's a house for sale on Mill Street, nothing fancy, but solid, 4 bedrooms, good well, stable out back." Sam's hand stilled on the plate he was drying. "Clara, I know it's fast," she continued, not meeting his eyes. "But we're not young folks with unlimited time, and those children need stability now, not someday." She finally looked at him. "Unless I've misread things entirely?" "You haven't." Sam set down the plate and turned her to face him. "But you deserve better than a broken-down soldier with more ghosts than prospects." "Stop!" Clara's voice was fierce. "You're the man who gave up his solitude to shelter 2 lost children, who faced down armed men rather than let them be taken, who's spending his last dollar to give them a real life. That's the man I rode through a blizzard for." From the parlor came the sound of Eliza reading aloud, slowly but determinedly, while James corrected her pronunciation. The domestic sounds broke through Sam's last defenses. "The house on Mill Street," he said roughly. "Would it suit a family of 4? Clara's smile was radiant. "I think it would suit perfectly." Later, as they walked back to the boarding house where Sam had secured rooms, Eliza slipped her hand into Clara's. "You stay with us?" she asked hopefully. "If you'll have me." Clara replied. James, walking beside Sam, tugged on his coat. "She makes us a real family?" Sam thought of Mary, of Sarah, of all the might-have-beens. But grief, he was learning, could share space with new joy. "Yeah, son, she does." Morrison's trial 2 weeks later was almost anticlimactic. Faced with overwhelming evidence and the testimony of several other families whose children had disappeared, he broke down and confessed to his trafficking network. The revelation sent shockwaves through the territory, leading to multiple arrests and the liberation of dozens of captive workers, many of them children. But Sam barely noticed the larger implications. He was too busy learning to live again. The house on Mill Street needed work. New shingles, fresh paint, a dozen small repairs. The children threw themselves into helping, Eliza proving surprisingly adept with a hammer while James organized nails with military precision. Clara officially maintained her own residence until propriety could be satisfied, but she spent every free moment with them. She taught the children their letters, treated their lingering health issues, and slowly, carefully, helped Sam remember how to smile without guilt. One evening, as November gave way to December, Sam found himself on the porch of their new home, watching the sun set over the distant mountains. Inside, Clara helped the children with their lessons while something savory bubbled on the stove. The front door opened, and Eliza appeared. "Papa Sam? Mama Clara says dinner's ready." The titles had emerged naturally, unprompted. Papa Sam and Mama Clara, not replacing what was lost, but building something new. "I'll be right in," he told her, taking one last look at the painted sky. 3 months ago, he'd been a ghost haunting a lonely canyon. Now he was a father again, soon to be a husband again, part of a patchwork family stitched together by chance and choice. The twins had been sold like goods, treated as property, denied their humanity. But here in this simple house on Mill Street, they were reclaiming everything stolen from them. They were learning to be children again, to trust in tomorrow, to believe in the permanence of love. Sam rose and headed inside, where lamplight and laughter waited. The red rocks of his canyon refuge stood empty now, but he didn't mourn their abandonment. He'd found something better than hiding. He'd found a reason to rejoin the world. The attack came on a moonless night in early December, swift and brutal despite all their preparations. Sam woke to the crash of breaking glass and Eliza's scream. He rolled from bed, grabbing his rifle in one fluid motion born of years of soldier's instinct. "Stay down!" he shouted, but the children were already moving, drilled in the defensive procedures he'd taught them. They scrambled for the root cellar entrance while Sam took position at the window. Muzzle flashes lit the darkness. 3, maybe 4 shooters. Morrison might be in jail awaiting trial, but his associates had come for revenge. A bullet splintered the door frame inches from Sam's head. He returned fire methodically, conserving ammunition. Where was Clara? She'd left at sunset, promising to return early in the morning. Thank God she wasn't caught in this. "Hayes!" A voice from outside, thick with drink and malice. "Morrison says hello from his jail cell. Says to tell you accidents happen, especially to brats who testify." Sam's blood ran cold. They weren't here just for revenge. They wanted to silence the witnesses. A torch arced through the broken window, landing on Clara's carefully sewn curtains. Flames leaped up immediately, hungry and spreading fast. Sam cursed, torn between fighting the fire and defending against the attackers. "Papa Sam!" James's voice from the cellar. "There's smoke!" The choice made itself. Sam abandoned his position, racing for the cellar stairs. He found the twins huddled in the corner, Eliza clutching the silver locket that connected them to their past. "Up the back stairs! Quick now!" He herded them toward the rear exit, but flames had already spread to that side of the house. The heat was overwhelming, smoke thick as wool. A figure appeared in the doorway, one of Morrison's men. Rifle raised, Sam shot without thinking, the man spinning away into darkness, but more were coming, and the fire was winning its race against time. Then, impossibly, he heard it, the thunder of hooves. A cavalry charge in miniature. Through the smoke came a battle cry he recognized from a dozen campaigns. "3rd Cavalry, stand down or be shot down! His old unit! But how?" The answer came as Sergeant Mike O'Sullivan burst through the burning doorway. 2 troopers behind him. "Thought you could use some help. Sam, Mrs." Winters rode hell for leather to the fort when she saw riders heading this way. They formed a defensive square. Soldiers who'd never forgotten one of their own. The attackers, caught between military rifles and spreading fire, broke and ran. Sam heard horses galloping away, the cowards choosing flight over fight. "The house!" Sam started, but O'Sullivan was already shouting orders. Soldiers formed bucket brigades, others beating at flames with blankets. A futile effort. The fire had taken hold too deeply. "Let it burn," Sam said heavily, watching their new life consumed. "Just get everyone clear." They retreated to the street, where half of Millstone had gathered. Clara pushed through the crowd, her face white with fear that only eased when she saw them all standing. "Thank God," she breathed, pulling the children close. "When I saw the riders, I knew. I rode straight for the fort. Captain Brennan didn't hesitate." Sam's throat was raw from smoke, his shooting arm bleeding from a graze he hadn't noticed. But they were alive. The rest was just wood and possessions. "You're hurt." Clara was already examining his arm with professional efficiency. Around them, the crowd murmured anger at this attack on their newest citizens. Judge Thornton appeared, still in his nightshirt, but radiating authority. "This is outrageous. Attacking children to prevent testimony? I'll see every man involved hanged. Have to catch them first," Sheriff Daniels said, organizing a posse. But Sam knew they'd be across the territorial border by dawn, lost in the lawless maze of mining camps and outlaw towns. As the house collapsed in a shower of sparks, Eliza began to cry. The first tears Sam had seen from her since that night in the canyon. Not for the house, he realized, but for the loss of safety. The reminder that some people would always see them as property to be reclaimed or eliminated. "Listen to me," Sam said, kneeling before both children. "Look at me." They did, tears tracking through soot-stained faces. "They tried to take you that first night, and I stopped them. They tried again with laws and papers, and we stopped them. Tonight they tried with fire and bullets, and we're still here, still together." He gripped their small shoulders. "You are the blood I lost years ago, found again by God's own miracle. Nothing, no man, no law, no fire will take you from me again. That's my promise." James threw his arms around Sam's neck, and Eliza followed, their small bodies shaking with residual fear and relief. "Well said." Captain Brennan had arrived, his uniform impeccable despite the late hour. "Mr. Hayes, the Army remembers its debts. You saved my life at Apache Pass, pulled me from under my dead horse with Apaches closing in. Time I returned the favor properly." He produced an official-looking document. Telegraph from Fort Lowell. Given the ongoing threats to military witnesses in a federal case, Morrison's network crossed territorial boundaries, making this federal jurisdiction. I'm authorized to provide protection. "We're not going back to the fort," Sam said firmly. "These children need normal lives, not military compounds." "Agreed. Which is why I'm assigning a detail to patrol this area regularly. And..." Brennan smiled. "There's the matter of your back pay. Seems the Army made an error in your discharge settlement. 3 years of sergeant's pay, plus interest. Should be enough to rebuild. And then some." Sam stared at the paper Brennan handed him. It was more money than he'd seen in years, enough to start over properly. "This isn't charity," Brennan added quietly. "You earned every cent in blood and service. Let us help you now." Martha Holcomb bustled forward. "They'll stay with me tonight. All of them." Her tone brooked no argument. "I've got empty rooms and hot soup. Tomorrow we'll see about more permanent arrangements." As the crowd began to disperse, Clara slipped her hand into Sam's. "We'll rebuild," she said simply. "Better and stronger. Mill Street was just the beginning." "I'm sorry," Sam said. "I brought this danger to your door." "Our door," Clara corrected. "And those men brought it, not you. Don't you dare take responsibility for evil actions of evil men." At Martha's boarding house, they were treated like returning heroes. Hot baths appeared, fresh clothes, food that nobody felt much like eating but consumed anyway. The twins, exhausted by terror and relief, fell asleep in their borrowed beds. Sam sat on the porch despite the cold, keeping watch out of habit. Clara joined him, wrapped in a shawl, carrying 2 cups of coffee liberally laced with whiskey. "The children called me Mama Clara to the soldiers," she said softly, "in front of the whole town. Does that bother you?" "No, it honors me." She was quiet for a moment. "I suppose we should make it official soon. For their sake, of course." "Of course," Sam agreed solemnly. "Purely for their sake." Clara laughed, the sound bright in the darkness. "Samuel Hayes, are you courting me on Martha Holcomb's front porch, covered in soot and smelling of gunpowder? Seems I am, though I should mention I've got nothing to offer but 2 traumatized children, a burned house, and more enemies than prospects, and a heart big enough to shelter lost souls," Clara added. "Don't forget that." She stood, bending to kiss his forehead. "Court me properly tomorrow, when we're not covered in ashes. Tonight, just be grateful we're all alive." She went inside, leaving Sam to his vigil. But for the first time, keeping watch didn't feel lonely. Behind him slept his family. Blood family in the twins. Chosen family in Clara. They'd tried to burn that away. But love, Sam was learning, was harder to kill than hate. The stars wheeled overhead, ancient and indifferent to human struggles. But in one boarding house in a small territorial town, 4 people slept safely, guarded by a man who'd learned that some battles were worth fighting forever. Tomorrow they'd begin again. New house, new defenses, new determination. Morrison's men had failed in their primary goal. The children would testify, sending him to federal prison. The trafficking network would crumble, and other children would go free. But tonight, Sam simply sat and kept watch, as he'd once done in an Apache Canyon, as he'd always do for those under his protection. The fire had taken things, but things could be replaced. What mattered, the fragile, fierce bonds of found family, remained unburned and unbroken. "You are the blood I lost years ago," he whispered to the night, repeating his promise like a prayer, and in their borrowed beds, 2 children slept peacefully, knowing it was true. Dawn broke clear and crystalline over the prairie, painting the frost-covered grass in shades of gold and silver. 6 months had passed since the fire. 6 months of rebuilding more than just walls and roofs. The new house stood prouder than the old, with thick adobe walls that could withstand both bullets and flames, testament to a community that had rallied around one of their own. Sam stood on the porch, coffee steaming in the crisp morning air, watching the sun climb above the distant mesas. Inside, he could hear the morning chaos that had become his new normal. Clara corralling the children for breakfast, Eliza practicing her reading aloud, James clattering around looking for his slate. "Papa Sam!" James burst through the door, nearly spilling Sam's coffee. "The horses had their foal. Come see." In the barn, the children crouched beside a spindly-legged creature still wet from birth, their faces radiant with wonder. It was moments like these that made everything worthwhile, seeing them marvel at life instead of merely surviving it. "What should we name her?" Eliza asked, gently stroking the foal's mane. "That's for you two to decide." Sam said, "She's yours to raise." The twins exchanged their silent communication. Then James announced, "Hope, because she gives us hope for new beginnings." Clara appeared in the barn door, flour dusting her apron. "Very fitting. Now come wash up. Breakfast won't wait for philosophical discussions." As they walked back to the house, Sam noticed riders approaching from town. His hand moved instinctively toward his sidearm, but Clara touched his arm. The hypervigilance was fading slowly, replaced by cautious optimism. The lead rider was Judge Thornton himself, accompanied by a federal marshal and several official-looking men. "Morning, Sam, Mrs. Hayes." The judge tipped his hat to Clara, using her new married name with obvious pleasure. They'd wed quietly 2 months prior, with the whole town turning out to celebrate. "Brought some news you'll want to hear." They gathered in the parlor, the children listening from the doorway despite Clara's attempts to shoo them to their lessons. Morrison's trial concluded yesterday. The marshal announced, guilty on all counts, 20 years hard labor, and his assets seized to compensate the victims. He produced a leather folder. "This is for the Carpenter children, their portion of the restitution. It'll be held in trust until they reach majority." Sam examined the documents. It was a substantial sum, enough to ensure the twins could attend college, start businesses, build lives free from want. "There's more," Judge Thornton added. "The investigation uncovered records going back years. We've identified dozens of children taken from their families, sold into bondage. Many are being reunited as we speak. Your courage in standing up to Morrison started something bigger than you know." Eliza and James had crept closer during the conversation. Now Eliza spoke up, her English clear and confident after months of Clara's patient teaching. "Will other children find their families too?" "Yes, dear one," the judge said kindly. "Thanks to your bravery in testifying, many families will be whole again." After the officials left, the day settled into its familiar rhythm. Clara returned to her pharmacy. She'd insisted on keeping her profession even after marriage, scandalizing some but earning respect from most. The children attended the small school, where they'd progressed from curiosities to accepted members of their peer group. Sam spent his days managing their small ranch, the cattle and horses a far cry from military life, but satisfying in their simplicity. The back pay and restitution money meant they lived comfortably, but more importantly, it meant security. No more scraping by, no more choosing between food and medicine. As afternoon waned, Sam rode to the old canyon where it all began. He rarely visited anymore, but something drew him today, perhaps the need to measure how far they'd come. The cabin still stood, weathered but intact. Desert creatures had claimed it, And Sam let them be. This place had served its purpose, sheltering him in his darkest hours until fate brought him back to life. He dismounted near the spot where he'd first heard the children's cries. 6 months ago, he'd been a ghost haunting these rocks. Now he was a husband, a father, a man with purpose again. "Thought I'd find you here." Clara appeared on her mare, having tracked him with the skills she'd quietly developed. "The children are with Martha, learning to make preserves." "Just remembering," Sam said, helping her dismount. "Good memories or bad?" "Both. Neither." He gestured at the abandoned cabin. "I died here, in a way, but I was also reborn here." Clara linked her arm through his. "The children want to know if we can have a proper Christmas celebration. Eliza's never had one, and James barely remembers anything before they were taken." Sam's jaw tightened, then relaxed. "Yes, of course. The biggest tree we can find. Presents, feast, the whole production." "Good, because I've already started planning with Martha and the other women." Clara's smile was mischievous. "You'll need to play Santa Claus." "I will not." "You will. For them." Her voice softened. "They need memories of joy to balance the darkness. We all do." As they rode home together, the setting sun painted the landscape in warm hues. The town had grown in recent months, new families arriving as word spread of Morrison's downfall and the rule of law taking hold. The frontier was changing, civilization advancing one family at a time. That evening, around the dinner table, James regaled them with his school adventures while Eliza quietly helped serve, her natural protectiveness of her brother evolving into a general caretaking nature. They still had nightmares sometimes, still flinched at unexpected sounds, but the healing continued, slow and steady as desert rain. "Miss Patterson says I'm the best at arithmetic," James announced proudly. "Because you practice." Eliza reminded him. "Papa Sam helps you every night." "Education opens doors," Sam said, the phrase becoming a family motto. "Doors that can never be closed again." After dinner, they gathered in the parlor. Clara played the small piano they'd purchased, badly, as she'd warned, but with enthusiasm. The children sang along to hymns and folk songs, their voices blending in harmony that spoke of shared survival. As bedtime approached, Sam told stories of his cavalry days, carefully edited but truthful in their essence. The children never tired of hearing how he'd saved Captain Brennan, or the time he'd tracked a lost patrol through a sandstorm. "Will you teach us to track?" James asked sleepily. "When you're older, for now. Focus on your letters and numbers." "And being children," Clara added firmly. "There's time enough for adult skills later." After tucking them in, a ritual that still made Sam's chest tight with emotion, he and Clara sat on their new porch, watching stars emerge in the clear sky. "Any regrets?" Clara asked, as she did sometimes. "Only that it took tragedy to bring us together," Sam replied honestly. "You?" "None. This life, these children. It's more than I dared dream after Thomas died." She referred rarely to her first husband, but Sam understood. They both carried ghosts, but had learned to make room for new love alongside old grief. A coyote howled in the distance, answered by another. Once, that sound had meant loneliness. Now it was simply part of the desert symphony, no more threatening than the wind in the grass. The marshal said something interesting. Clara mentioned, "They're looking for experienced men to help patrol the territory. Keep the peace, especially men who understand both sides of the law." "I'm no lawman." "No, but you're a protector. Always have been." She squeezed his hand. "Think about it. Regular pay, chance to prevent what happened to our children from happening to others." "Our children." The words still caught him off guard sometimes, the casual assumption of shared parenthood. But it was true. They were theirs now, bound by choice and love rather than blood alone. As they prepared for bed, Sam checked the locks out of habit. Though the need had lessened, the town patrol passed regularly, and Morrison's network had crumbled with his imprisonment. In their room, Clara showed him a letter that had arrived that day. From a family in California. Their daughter was one of the children recovered thanks to the investigation. They want to thank us personally. Sam read the tear-stained words of gratitude. The story of a girl returned after 2 years of captivity. It was one of many such letters they'd received, each a reminder that their stand had rippled outward like stones in a pond. "We did good," he said simply. "We did right," Clara corrected. "Sometimes that's harder than good." As sleep took them, Sam reflected on the journey that had brought them here, from a lonely canyon to a full house, from despair to purpose, from isolation to community. The twins had been sold like goods, treated as property, denied their humanity. But in fighting for them, Sam had reclaimed his own humanity as well. Tomorrow would bring new challenges, school events, ranch work, the 1,000 small tasks of family life. But tonight, in their adobe house on the prairie, 4 souls who'd found each other against all odds slept peacefully. The children were safe, their futures secured. Love had built walls stronger than any fortress. And somewhere in the vast machinery of justice, other children were going home to their families, other chains being broken, other hearts learning to hope again. It had started with a cry in the darkness and a man willing to answer it. It continued with courage, community, and the radical belief that every child deserved freedom. The red rocks of the canyon stood eternal, witnesses to transformation. But the real monument to their journey wasn't stone. It was the laughter that filled their home, the small hands that reached trustingly for his, the woman who'd chosen to share their improbable adventure. They were family, forged in fire and held by choice. And in the harsh beauty of the frontier, that was miracle enough. Thank you for listening to this story. I'd love to know where you're enjoying these tales from, whether you're listening during your commute, relaxing at home, or somewhere else entirely. Please subscribe to From Wild West channel and share your thoughts in the comments below. Your feedback helps me create more stories that touch your hearts.